Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the City Council Urban Affairs and Housing meeting to order. Today is June 8th. We have one item on our agenda for tonight's meeting, order number 22-108-572, the application for a special permit from attorney Brian Falk on behalf of Alta Marlborough LLC Wood Partners to build a mixed-use project in the neighborhood business district consisting of 10,074 square feet of ground floor retail and commercial space, 276 dwelling units, in addition to an on-site parking garage with 448 spaces to be located at the corner of Lincoln and Mechanic Streets. So we have the petitioner here taking their seats in the well, make sure that green lights are on, all of those microphones if you're going to be speaking, and I'll open it up and let you do what you have to give us tonight as additional information.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair and councilors. For the record, Brian Falk from Myrick O'Connell, representing the applicant Alta Marlborough LLC, which is an affiliate of Wood Partners. With me tonight, Jim Lambert, from Wood Partners, Phil Cordero from Allen Major Engineering, and Michael Bennett from the architectural team. As an update, since our public hearing on May 9th, council voted on Monday night to approve a zoning map amendment and zoning ordinance amendment for the project. So our site is now entirely located within the neighborhood business district, and the City Council now has authority to modify by special permit dimensional landscaping controls applicable to the project. On May 18th, we held a balloon test at the project site. Our engineers floated large red balloons at the four corners towards the middle of the proposed buildings. We lucked out with weather and had minimal wind. The balloon at the corner of Lincoln and Mechanic showed that the building will appear a bit below the height of the Fry building, which is at the opposite corner of our site. This was also an opportunity to discuss the project with our neighbors. We sent direct mail to our entire abutters list. We posted notice on the city's website, and I know that information about the test was circulated on social media. We had approximately 15 individuals attend, in addition to several counselors and the community advocate. We shared our plans and discussed various issues with the attendees in addition to displaying the balloons. Overall feedback at the site visit was positive. We've also been engaged in discussions with our two direct abutters to talk about screening for the project. Those discussions are ongoing, but we're confident that we'll have a plan that will be acceptable to our neighbors. Last week, we submitted a draft special permit decision with a list of proposed conditions. I expect that we'll walk through those conditions at some point, but I just wanted to hit on a few highlights. Condition 6 includes a provision on restricting the affordable units at 10%. This ensures that these units will count towards the city's 40B inventory. Condition 7 requires that Wood Partners build the rail trail lot and convey it to the city. Condition 8 addresses easements for the parallel parking spaces along Lincoln and Mechanic Streets. Condition 9 addresses funding for improvements to the Jefferson Street parking lot, which is required by our agreement with the MEDC. Condition 10 addresses screening and landscaping for our immediate abutters at 91 and 103 Mechanic Street. That condition 10 may be subject to change as we continue discussions with those neighbors. And finally, conditions 11 and 12 provide a list of transportation and pedestrian measures. This is nearly word-for-word copy of a list of recommendations that was provided by our traffic engineer, Vanessa and Associates, in the transportation impact assessment that we submitted with our application. Finally, we received initial comments from the site plan committee. We had met with the committee back on April 26th and reviewed our plans with them. At that time, the committee did not have a lot of comments or questions. Unlike some projects, this is one that will go back to the site plan committee. So they will have another bite at the apple, as it were, and so that may explain why we haven't received a tremendous number of comments from the site plan committee, because they'll see this again in a formal session. And finally, up on the screen is an updated rendering. This is the view of the site from Mechanic Street. This was requested by counselors at the public hearing. We have one more rendering that came in later today of another view of the rail trail entrance and the building behind that, which we can bring up at another meeting, but I've since filed that with the council. So with that, happy to take your questions.
All right, I have a few points that I want to bring up, and then I'm sure that there are some initial comments. I know, as you said, We have received comments from Mr. DePercio, city engineer, and from Priscilla Ryder. It's my understanding that they want you to come to next Tuesday's site plan to be able to have further discussion, with the hope that we could meet again next Wednesday. My understanding that worked for you, and the rest of the committee was amenable to that. There was a request that I had made to do a review of the traffic study. Mr. DePercio indicated that he had found a company. He thought he would be able to be here tonight, but I don't see him yet, so I don't know. But I just want to make sure that that is the understanding of the committee. It's not someone going to do another traffic study. The one that you did was relatively soon. It's just taking the information from that over 300-page document and making sure that the conclusions that you came up with are the same that this company would come up with. So it's a simple peer review, but my assumption is that it would be paid for by the applicant. So I don't know if that needs to be another condition to the special permit, how that actually works. Maybe we can talk about that specific outside of the committee meeting. I don't know if they send you a bill, exactly those details. We've never done this since I've been on the council, so I don't know what exactly happens. But so long as the rest of the committee, rest of the council is okay with that, I think with the issues that we came up with at McGee Farm, with not having anything to be able to back up other than the comments that were made by the police department and the city engineer, I think going this route will be helpful for. We didn't get a lot of comments, but there were a few with concerns about the traffic. So I want to make sure that that is clear. It's my understanding that the zoning change that we did, there's a 21-day appeal period, and I don't think that has been finalized yet, so it's not through the whole process of that one. And the change that we just voted on Monday has to be re-advertised. So I want to make sure that those are officially done before we finalize this. I know that you may be in a hurry, but I think we've got some time to go through this. Let's see, I know it's an issue for me and maybe a couple of other counselors that it is 10% that you're requesting, where the code says 15, so we need to talk about that. I would rather see the whole 15 rather than to get money, but that will be a discussion, I guess, that the council has. It's the way the language is worded, we have to agree to it, and by asking you to change the special permit or us not agreeing to that point, I think we'll get to that discussion. And the other one is, I don't think it's really been talked about a lot, just the overall, the fact that the city council gave MEDC $1 million to buy the property with the plan for somebody to come back and buy it. So I know it's been bought, you've had to buy additional property, but nobody's talked about that $1 million. How are we getting it back?
Madam,
so, yes.
I'm happy to provide some insight to that. So I believe that, and Brian or Jim, correct me, the conditions 7 in the special, though they don't specifically say that, condition 7, the rail trail lot, the building of the paving that and building the amenity building, and then the paving on Jefferson Street, those two combined are the $1 million that are the offset for the property. So Brian or Jim, you guys tell me if I'm right or wrong on that.
That's correct, Mr. President. MEDC and Wood Partners have entered into what they're calling a land swap agreement. And so it's essentially taking the MEDC parcels that we would acquire, and then MEDC and then through the city would acquire both the rail trail lot that we're going to be building right next to the site and then conveying to the city, and then improvements to the Jefferson Street parking lot, which we had gotten an estimate that's included as an exhibit in our agreement with MEDC.
All right, because reading 7, it talks about the conveying the land, having completed the parking lot and restroom, but it doesn't talk about the other parking lot on Jefferson, to my understanding.
Right, that's condition 9, I'm sorry, if you skip down,
Okay.
where we talk about the payment we would be making for those improvements We have a project scope with a dollar amount that's part of the MEDC agreement, and so that's what condition 9 speaks to.
Okay, and I know, I haven't read, I see that the city engineer has returned some comments, and I'm sure that there'll be more, but both he and Ms. Ryder had questioned about the restrooms, and I know for me personally, that's a concern. I'm not sure I want either the parking or the restrooms there, so if that becomes an issue, if the city doesn't want it, and it stays in your hands, I think that's a conversation that we'll have as we progress through this. So, all right, that's really all I had specifically. We can either go through these, or if people have specific questions before we kind of open this up. Council Wagner, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm excited about this project, and I think it won't take too much. I think that I feel positive for getting to a point where it makes sense moving forward. The sticking point for me is your energy choice. So my understanding is your plan is, and I know the marketing campaign is to call it natural gas, but it's primarily methane gas is what you're planning on using. Is that correct? For your energy heating and cooling?
For heating, the intent is to use natural gas that's available to the site as a public utility.
Because my concern, so it's several-fold. One is, and I did bring some information on it, but there's been, certainly in, over the last few years, there's been some really important information brought up around the amount of pollution that is in the environment when the methane gas is present. In this particular quote, I think it's important to remember, it was an NPR, so this one in particular was short and sweet. NPR, June 2, 2022, brought in, this is very recent, in this study, this person is an environmental epidemiologist, Hosea Kephart from Drexel University. NPR rented an air monitor to measure the combustion pollutant that's the biggest concern now with gas stoves, nitrogen dioxide, or NO2. It's a toxic gas that the EPA say can prompt breathing problems for people with asthma and other health issues, and children in particular are impacted by this. So having gas stoves in the unit, there's an increase of 20% increased risk of developing respiratory illness after just 12 minutes. The NO2 levels in the kitchen were 60% higher than guidelines of the World Health Organization. So that environmental impact does concern me, and this, in addition to taking into consideration the bill that was passed here in Massachusetts on March 26th of 2021, which is referred to as the Next Generation Climate Roadmap Bill. The state is working the goals are to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, by 2030, reduce from 45% and 50% by 2050 over 5-year increments. So the state's got this really aggressive plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and a big part of that is looking to our communities to stop building things that are contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. So there's been some really exciting projects that have come by our way recently that use electricity, and I know electricity is not perfect, but the whole idea is to stop making the problem worse as we continue to green the grid. So I thought it was so innovative, your green roof. I mean, it's such a great project. Why are you, so one is in a few years, you're gonna be looking at retrofitting. Who's gonna pay for that? You're creating environments that are unhealthy for the people who are living there. The world's events contributing to the volatility, the gas prices, and where gas comes from in this country. I mean, there's so many negative aspects. Why are you choosing methane gas?
Councilor, first point I want to clarify is that our cooking is not gas. Generally speaking, our cooking has been electric historically, and here our cooking would be electric as well. That's just for starters. In terms of heat and your question, we have not yet used an all-electric system in this market. It's certainly been done. It is sparse. The technology is advancing, and of course, you're starting to see that more and more. Just we don't have experience having done that in the past. doesn't mean that it can't be done. Why we're proposing it is because just that is the system that we know, that we've built, it's tried and true. It is very efficient. You know, the systems that we use, these aquatherm systems, are extremely efficient, and they've gotten more and more efficient over the years. And so that is the product that has been tried and true in the industry here in Massachusetts. Not to say that new technologies aren't advancing. So that is why we're proposing it, you know, for this project. And like you said, we are using a green roof. It's the first time we've done a green roof. This is a significant green roof. I think either the first or the most significant that's been used in the city.
Right, which would be exciting, but it feels to me like it cancels that out if you're bringing in, increasing the demand with gas. And I hear you've never done it before, but it's not like it's secret technology out there. It's easily accessible to be able to figure out how to use heat pumps and design it without the gas, increasing demand for gas. Is that even something to consider, or is this a conversation? Because it's really important to me. And if that's, I mean, all this other stuff is great, but if this, how many units is it again? There's quite a few units here. We're talking 276 units. It's a lot of gas. It's a big increase that you're talking about.
Right. Counselor, we're happy to consider it, to go back and look with our team about its applicability in this project. We'd be more than happy to do that.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions that you had for now, Councilor Wagner?
Oh, that's it for me. Thank you.
All right, Councilor Doucette, I'm looking your direction.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Like Councilor Wagner, I'm concerned about natural gas emissions. Also, it's good to know that the appliances are actually going to be all electric, so that's, I appreciate that clarification. If you could look into the use of geothermal, you know, as far as doing wells to actually tap for heat pumps, you know, instead of doing it the air-based, especially beneficial for the winter months where, you know, I currently have a hybrid heat pump system, and I have it set up so that basically if the temperature is below 20 degrees, the natural gas engine kicks in. At 21 degrees, I have this banshee outside my house screaming, trying to keep up with trying to heat the house. So, you know, if the area heat pumps do have some limitations as far as effectively BTUs, if you want to talk about it at that level, but the geothermal is much more efficient in getting the heat out. I know that there's grants that are available from the state for geothermals. They're starting to get real big for that. So you might have to do a little bit of research talking to the state. The PACE program is someplace where you can go and talk to Mass Department of Energy and see what sort of options there are, understanding that this is cutting, you know, it's cutting edge for you, but it's proven technology that's out there. So, and as Councilor Wagon's talking about is, you know, we're looking at this as the long arc play. It's not just what's going on now, but what you're building here is going to be what's in place for at least 30 years. So, you know, we're talking about 2060, where we're trying to actually get to zero emissions. So sometime in that 30-year arc, you're going to have to confront actually doing some sort of retrofit if you don't take care of it now. Okay? So I'm trying to, you know, put an emphasis on really looking into this seriously. And I understand the systems you're doing now are cogeneration, so they do the heat and the electricity at the same time. It's a very efficient use of natural gas, but it still uses the natural gas. And even if it's something where it's a mixture of the two and you can do some, you know, basically save the cogen for like when it's really cold and then everything else is heat pump, that may be something that's more viable, you know, because you're throwing lots of BTUs in and out of the system considering the size of the facility. So I understand it's a big nut to crack, but there's an opportunity here to really demonstrate a flagship leadership in being green. The other is, considering the size of the parking garage, you may want to put solar panels on the roof of the parking garage. If you go to the Natick collection, the parking garage that's right near the food court, they covered that with solar panels a couple of years ago. And it's, you know, any place you can put solar panels is just a moneymaker, you know, for especially for property owners. So if you can look into that, that'll also be effective. And thank you for getting this picture, by the way. I was one of the councilors asking for this, so I do appreciate that. And as Councilor Roby was talking about. I think increasing the affordable units to 15% is actually something that I think is important to do at this point, because we're very close to that 10% limit. And, you know, you're giving the 10%, so you're not adding to our numbers very much. But if you put it to 15%, it gets us a little bit more breathing room to actually move forward and, you know, get something going. So that's about enough I can say. Thank you.
I'm going to see if anybody else wants to speak before I call back on you. So Counselor Navin, Counselor Landers, any questions or comments at this point?
When we got this material, I'm looking at some of these things, and they're somewhat of a surprise. Now, I know that Ms. Harris, MEDC, they spent a lot of time negotiating a lot of this. I guess I'm curious to see what all the negotiations were. You know, somehow, for instance, the parking lot, you know, they even come right down to the cents there. You know, I'm just curious of, you know, who, as I know, I have a lot of trust in Ms. Harris, and I know she kind of represents the city through MEDC, but, you know, what else is out there? And I think as far as the affordable, I think that's key. That's something we're gonna discuss more, about 15%? Or is that
The 15 affordable, is that what you? Yes, I
Yeah.
think we will have more discussion on that, definitely.
yeah, I think we gotta have some discussion on that.
Okay.
So I guess, Madam Chair, what I will do at some point, maybe have a discussion with MEDC, or maybe you as chair could gather some of the information and see what else we're getting,
Okay.
quite honestly.
Counselor Wagner?
Just quickly, I forgot to mention that I do feel very strongly that we would need the 15% affordable units, which would be 42. We're talking about 276 units. I would hope that we would get all 15% of those affordable units. So just wanted to say that. I forgot to mention it.
All right, I will open it up now from any other counselors who have questions, concerns, comments? No?
From the committee or?
From anybody that's here. So, Counselor Oram?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't know how if you were taking all the committee members first. Good evening. First question is about what was just discussed. You mentioned the stoves are electric. Does each individual unit have their own dryer and hot water heater? And how is that fueled?
Yes, Counselor, that is correct. Each unit has a washer and dryer separately, and they have their own hot water heater. Usually it's an instantaneous hot water heater.
And what's the energy that it's using? Is it electric, gas?
Typically, it's natural gas.
Natural gas. Okay. And then I know, and I haven't seen the negotiations either, but you're planning all rentals, no owner-occupied?
That's
no
correct.
condominiums, and that's concerning. I think you see a lot more opportunity, in my view, with condominiums. Owner-occupied tends to have a relationship of caring for the properties, not that you won't, but I'm saying I prefer to see owner-occupied in the city. Unfortunately, we're going to see 276 units. The affordable bothers me as well, not bothers, but I'm concerned as well. 10%. We require 15. The cost overview of the $1 million, very interested in seeing the negotiations, as well as how that came about, and I'm learning about it right now. That really concerns me, that I'm learning about this right now. I thought the city was going to get the $1 million back. So I want to see a cost analysis, and it'd be very important for me to see what the negotiations were. So, Council Landers, I agree with you 100%. We need to be transparent on what happened before it got here. And I appreciate you sending that information, or whoever has that information. MEDC may have it as well, so maybe they can enter some of their information as well. The review of the fiscal impacts, in the school impact, school-age children. I'd like to see that peer reviewed as well. In my view, we're taking what you gave us, I guess it was 4Gear, it was the person that did the analysis. I think it's just as important that the city have a peer review on that fiscal impact to make sure it's in key with what's being presented. So I would ask the committee to consider a peer review as well as on the fiscal impact. Outside of that, we do want to see that area cleaned up. Personally, I feel it's a little bit too many apartments for that area. You are providing the parking, though, I give you credit there. Unfortunately, we're seeing projects that don't have enough parking not moving forward. So I give you credit there. That is quite a large parking lot for the units. So the concern is the amount of units. And I share the same concerns about energy efficiency, especially clean energy. I'd be curious to see how many electric charging stations you'll have as well. Thank you. That's it for now, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, I'm sure. Anybody else with questions, concerns on this? So Councilor Doucette's hand up again.
Thank you very much. I just want clarification on a couple of things. When you said that the appliances were all electric, you don't consider the hot water heater to be an appliance? Because you said the hot water heater is gas, right? And the dryer can be
Yeah,
either, I'm assuming.
Counselor, I'm not sure if I said that all the appliances are electric. I think the cooking is electric.
Okay, the cooking is, okay, so for clarification purposes, the stove will be electric, the washer will be electric, the dryer electric or gas?
We've done it both ways in the past. We're not far enough along to have picked the appliances at this point. Usually,
Okay,
that
okay.
wouldn't happen until until we break ground, because of the lead time on appliances. It's much too early for that.
Right, okay. I think that's, you can tell from here our concerns, so you can take that into account in your appliance selection. The incident on hot water, I know is not necessarily good for electric, but we need to figure out how to actually address that as well. Because in the ideal situation, if it's not obvious, is we don't want any gas to go into these buildings. So that's the ideal situation.
Right.
But, we'll see how it goes from there.
All right, I'm not seeing anybody with questions. I will then go over our preliminary information that we have from Mr. DePercio and from Ms. Ryder.
And Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I've seen Priscilla Ryder's comments. I haven't seen Tom DePercio's. I'm not sure when those came across. I don't know if anybody has a copy, just so we could read along.
I'm sure we could get you a copy. I have not read them either. I unfortunately was out of my home all day and just went on and saw these in my mailbox. So if you have a copy of Ms. Ryder's, we're going to do hers first. So she begins at our Site Plan Review Committee meeting on April 26th. We reviewed the plans and special permit application. The conceptual plans for a 4- and 5-story building with a rear parking garage, 276-unit mixed-use apartment, and retail space building was reviewed. In general, the Site Plan Review Committee noted that the layout and design appear to conceptually meet all the city zoning and public safety requirements, providing parking amenities and green space. Traffic report, the applicant has submitted traffic report, but it has not yet been reviewed in detail. It will be reviewed to ensure the project will not have traffic impacts and that proper mitigation recommendations are provided. This includes review of the parking lot access point next to the Assabet River Rail Trail, the parking garage capacity, on-street parking, site distances, and possible traffic calming measures at nearby intersections. The drainage report, the applicant noted that the drainage report also has not been finalized, and this will be provided to meet all stormwater requirements of the city. This will be reviewed in detail when the project comes to the Site Plan Review Committee for formal review. The fiscal impact report, the applicant noted that they are working on a fiscal impact report as well, which will be provided to the City Council for review. And the green roof concept would be the first in Marlborough and is a trend that is encouraged as it helps to provide cooling and stormwater controls that help curb climate change. Easements along Lincoln Street will be needed to accommodate the on-street parking which straddles the property line. The details of the sidewalk realignment will be worked out in site plan review. Easements will also be required for the new locations of the city sewer and drain utilities that are proposed to be relocated. We will review the utility plans in more detail during site plan review, but we will likely recommend that the water main be looped through the property and that an on-site hydrant be installed near the back of the project. Additionally, there will be utility work necessary in Lincoln Street to properly abandon the various existing utility connections to the properties. It is our understanding that the proponent will be improving the city parking lot on Jefferson Street. This is not shown in the application materials, but will need to be reviewed as part of the site plan review process. This is another option for consideration of the location of the public restrooms. And landscaping around the proposed city parking lot should be extended to the sidewalks at the intersection of Lincoln and Highland. If the applicant is successful in receiving a special permit, they would then return to site plan for formal review process. So you all have the copies from Mr. DePercio?
Yes, thank you.
All right, I can offer the following updated comments as we continue to review the preliminary plans and documents related to the proposed project. In general, I'm in favor of the project and I'm confident we will work out the engineering details of the utility connections and relocations, relocated sidewalks, utility and sidewalk easements, final repairs of Lincoln Street as part of the site plan review committee's process. I've reviewed the draft special permit document provided by Attorney Falk and do not have additional comments at this time. I reviewed the traffic impact report and have the following initial comments. There was a study of the Lincoln at Bolton Street signal done in 2015. That study showed Lincoln Street traffic counts considerably higher than the existing counts for Lincoln Street presented in the study. The traffic engineer should verify whether the existing counts should be further adjusted in addition to the COVID-19 adjustment that was applied. Also, the 2015 study showed that Lincoln at Bolton is a poorly functioning intersection. Could the traffic engineers confirm that the project will not significantly affect this signal as well? The traffic engineer should also address whether it is necessary to study the impact of the project on the signalized intersections at Lincoln and Pleasant, Lincoln and Broad, and the unsignalized intersection at Lincoln and Lakeside. The study indicates that the removal of hedges at the front of the residential property at 91 Mechanic would be necessary to achieve adequate sightline from the proposed driveway. Has permission been granted for this? The study also confirms that the location of this parking lot entrance in relation to the Highland Cashman intersection is appropriate. Is the separation distance sufficient to avoid conflicts? The proposed parallel parking spaces along Lincoln and Mechanic Street should be 22 feet long at a minimum, so there will be slightly fewer on-street spaces allowable than shown on the plans. There may be other comments upon more detailed review. There are also some issues that will need to be discussed further with respect to the parking lot and the restroom building that are owned by the city. There would be an easement through the city property for the access to the proposed development. What would be the obligations of the city to keep the access clear and open of snow? It serves as the emergency access for the project and also the access to a loading area to the building. The city will have to consider the ramifications of granting an easement over city property for these uses. What would prevent the general public from entering the emergency access road? What would prevent residents of the new development from parking in the parking lot for more convenient access to their units? The final details on the restroom building should still need to be reviewed and agreed upon, including its final exact location, the maintenance responsibilities, etc. Would the parking lot include lighting? As noted above, this traffic study should confirm that the location of this parking lot entrance with respect to the Highland Cashman intersection is appropriate. So there's a whole lot of stuff in that you obviously haven't seen yet and would need to be able to go over before we would have any discussions. But some of it may actually impact the special permit language maybe, because I think there's some of that, or the plans that may need to be revised. So. All right. We can start discussion. Did everybody received the fiscal impact, everybody received the traffic study, and everybody received their tallying of the design review? Everybody had a chance to look at that. I don't know if anybody took the time to do their own design review to see how you rated versus how they rated. I know that's supposed to be the idea behind that design review, so that we can kind of compare it, but if there's nothing else anybody has questions on, we can start going through the decision, just to kind of put it out there and see what we might need to come back and look at with some further information. Okay, so this is a notice of decision grant of special permit. I believe it has all of the parcels that are on there. The findings of facts.
Madam Chair?
I'm sorry, Counselor Doucette?
Yeah, in item 3 of findings of fact is the first reference to the 10%. I just want to make
I'm
note of
sorry,
that.
references what?
10% of affordable housing.
Yes, I know it's mentioned
I'm
in
just
several
making note that
places.
that's the first place would have to be changed.
And Madam Chair, if I
Yeah.
may, on that topic, so obviously the city's zoning ordinance requires that multifamily uses that are subject to a special permit must provide 15% affordable housing. Our use category is not in fact multifamily, it's mixed use, which is a different use category. And it's not just a frame of wording. Throughout the zoning ordinance, there are numerous instances where mixed use is treated differently than multifamily, on dimensional requirements, open space requirements. There are some places where mixed use is allowed, multifamily is not allowed, and vice versa. And so it has been our approach and our understanding of the zoning ordinance that the 15% requirement, or the affordability requirement, period, doesn't actually apply to our use. The 10% that we're putting forward is above and beyond what's required and what may be conditioned by special permit. And we think it's important for a number of reasons. It's something that we do. Wood Partners does affordable housing throughout many of its projects, probably most of its projects, number one. And number two, it obviously keeps the city level and doesn't have a negative impact on the city's subsidized housing inventory. So that's why we've used 10%. Again, I don't believe the zoning requires any affordable housing for this type of use because it's a mixed use. That's the case in the village district, but it's also the case throughout the city as well.
Okay, I guess that is, I think I'll talk to the solicitor about that to make sure he agrees. It's kind of, I know that reading the zoning gets a little confusing, but if that's your understanding. Council Wagner, did I see a hand?
Yeah, I think that's important, and we need to check with the solicitor, but I just want to point out math-wise, we're talking about 14 units, you're building 276 units, it's a really big, important project, and 14 units shouldn't make or break this, and I think it's really important that we stick to the 15, and we will, need to determine that through the solicitor, but I think that's an important point, and arguing over 14 units, given the scope of this project, feels like it's missing the point.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for filling us in on why you did what you did.
Madam Chair?
Councilor Doucette?
Yeah, I also want to raise similar issues that still, this is a neighborhood where, it's not high-income housing, all of it. And I think having more lower income is needed for that area of the city. So I think anything we can do to at least provide more affordable housing would be worthwhile in that neighborhood. So, thank you.
All right, so we have the findings of facts, talks about the location, as was mentioned, number 3. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Oram.
If I could just ask, sorry, I hit that. If I could just ask on that 10 to 15% for affordable housing, if you could ask the solicitor, does it mean the 1-unit bedroom units, the 2-bedroom units, or the 3-bedroom units? I'd be curious how it gets decided on those units, and maybe the applicant might wish to, if it's okay with you, Madam Chair, to explain which type of unit it would be. Would it be the 1, 2, or 3-bedroom units for the 10% that they're proposing? If I may, through you, Madam Chair, to them.
Okay.
Sure, thank you. And if you've, one thing I forgot to mention in my opening remarks was that the city has set up this website about the project and given us an opportunity to respond to questions that have been submitted by residents, which we appreciate. And that question was raised, and I have that available. So of our total number of affordable units is 28, and the breakdown is 17 of them are 1-bedroom, 10 of them are 2-bedroom, and 1 of them is 3-bedroom.
And would these be purchased through or rented through a lottery?
That would depend upon how this is set up with DHCD, which is the regulatory agency. And one of the conditions in the special permit lays out that process, that we would work with DHCD and the city to set that up.
Okay.
But by doing it through DHCD, it's not just providing affordable units, providing affordable units that will actually count on the city's SHI, which is important.
Right, that's the whole goal of the percentages. And I don't know that we've ever had a discussion on the multifamily that we've approved with those as to which ones were affordable. We just have left it up to them, I guess. All right, and I do think, based on a prior request to amend, to ask for a simple read, how was it worded? I think you were involved. We had a special permit where they wanted to modify the bedrooms, and it was a simple change versus a detailed change because we didn't specify in the special permit the number of bedrooms. So I think that's another lesson learned, that maybe we should do that. So if you have that information to add to the total number of units, I think that might be important enough to have. But we'll get there as we go through this. So as was mentioned, number 3 is the beginning part of the 10% restricted. Multiple pages of the same thing. Number 5 talks about the certified list of abutters and the actual site plan. We'll need to find out if there's a revised date in there. Somewhere in here, there was the number 16 in the findings of facts. We do have the filled out form for Councilor Landers that you have would be included as attachment B. So either the city clerk can get you a stamped copy if you need that, or the copy that we received at our meeting on Monday. All right, so the conditions, which is on page 3. The typical construction, the fact that site plan will take place once this is approved, the modification of the plans, notwithstanding conditions 1 and 2, site plan committee may approve minor amendments as long as said changes do not materially increase the impervious area, alter traffic flow, increase the size of the building, or increase the number of units, which I think is...
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Councilor
This is
Wong.
where you may want to put the restriction
specificity.
on the bedroom count. It might be a good category to put it within.
So if you have that and can get it to us, that would be helpful. Thank you, Councilor Oram. Number 4 is the incorporation of submissions. So you've given us lots of photos, lots of documents. All that is part of this. Number 5 is the stormwater and erosion control. The applicant shall ensure that its site superintendent during construction of the project is competent in stormwater and erosion control management. This individual's credentials shall be acceptable to the engineering division of the city's Department of Public Works and the city's Conservation Commission. This individual shall be responsible for checking the site before, during, and after storm events, including weekends and evenings when storms are predicted. This individual shall ensure that no untreated stormwater leaves the site consistent with the state's and the city's stormwater regulations. This individual shall ensure compliance with the approved sequence of construction plan and the approved erosion control plan. The applicant shall grant this individual complete authority of the site as it relates to stormwater and erosion controls. And I do believe site plan usually has a whole bunch of language that they will add into their conditions related to that.
Correct.
Number 6, again, is the affordable units, talking about 10% of the residential units. This does go into some specificity. The site shall be made available as rental units at affordable prices to renters whose annual income does not exceed 80% of the area median income adjusted for family size as determined by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in perpetuity or the longest period allowed by law. The affordable housing unit shall comply with all requirements for inclusion in the subsidized housing inventory of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development. Prior to obtaining a final certificate of occupancy for any unit within the use, the applicant is in coordination with the city and its community development authority shall file all required submissions to DHCD for inclusion of the affordable housing units on the SHI and shall diligently take all actions necessary to include the affordable housing units on the SHI, which was a subsidized housing inventory, including without limitation preparing and executing a regulatory agreement and declaration of restrictive covenants and or any restrictive instrument necessary to ensure compliance with this condition, a marketing plan, and all other required documentation. All costs associated with complying with this condition, included but not limited to the DHCD process, recording of all the documents with the Registry of Deeds, and the marketing plan for the affordable units shall be borne by the applicant.
And Madam Chair, if I may, almost identical language is included in the Green District special permit, and the city solicitor and Post Road Residential are actually working on this process right now. This is not something the city hasn't seen before, and it's working so far for that special permit.
Okay. Well, I know, looking at the Globe, I see multiple little articles where it's talking about a lottery for different cities and towns, and I've never seen Marlborough, so it's like, why are they doing it that way, and how do we do ours? So it's nice to know. Number 7 is the rail trail lot. Not later than the issuance of a final certificate of occupancy for the use, the applicant shall convey to the city the land shown on the plans as Lot 2, having completed the parking lot and restroom improvements as shown on the plans, retaining an access easement over Lot 2 for the benefit of the use. So as was mentioned, that will be discussion, I guess, more at site plan and then among us. Yes, Councilor Warren.
On that point, just the definition of final certificate of occupancy, are you planning to occupy any of the units prior to the final certificate of occupancy? Will there be individual ones for each apartment? And when do we consider this condition? Or what was your consideration for us considering this condition?
Through the chair, Councilor, so the anticipation and what we've typically done on our projects is deliver in phases. So not individual units, but by chunks of the building. And that could go vertically or horizontally, depending on, what type of building it is. But we would work with the building department on that in sort of pre-building permit meetings on how we'll phase that, a plan to phase that, a plan for safety on the site, and things like that. And it's typically worked well for us in the past.
And thank you for that explanation. I would suggest, Madam Chair, that we state that upon the first occupancy permit issued, that we acquire Lot 2. I don't know how the applicant feels, but I would suggest once that first occupancy permit's issued, that this condition state that not the final, but the first.
Counselor, if I may?
Yes.
So there's some
chair.
logic behind that. That has more to do with construction logistics than anything. So as you can imagine, right, that's a parking lot in a sort of important corner of the site. We'll be building a garage out back. We'll be building the fire lane. We'll be building exterior, portions of the building. So the idea in all of our projects, including this one, even for whether we're handing over a piece of it to somebody else, in this case the city, or keeping parking lot for ourselves, is you'd have a rough binder all the way until the project's fully completed. And then you'd come back at the end, do a final coat, do the striping and things like that, because it gets beat up. And the idea here was to hand over a fully completed, clean, parcel, not have it be partially done. And so that was the thought process. And the final final CO in our mind is the ultimate hammer, if you will, for the city. So we can't do anything without a final CO. So we feel like that's, the city's very insulated there from a safety perspective of getting that parcel in its condition that it should be in. But it really has to do with construction logistics more than anything else.
I would think that you would want to be able to put your trucks in and out from that side of the property too, so I can
Correct.
understand your concern. I know the term final certificate of occupancy's come up before, and I think there's a definition either in the packet or somewhere in the code, so that could be another conversation with legal and maybe site plan to see what they think final occupancy is.
And if I'm, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if I may, using final occupancy has been something that we've used in a couple of the newer special permits. In the past, the language the city had used was just certificate of occupancy. It didn't say final, and that was interpreted with greater flexibility in the past. And in recent year or so, it's been interpreted as, if it says final, you have to wait until the very end. And so, where we use final and where we don't use final, it has some significance in the decision now.
Okay, we'll get that clarified, but are you okay with their?
Well, I would ask that we consider a determination on how many occupancy permits are issued prior to us finally having the restrooms as well as the parking lot. And what I would suggest is maybe the applicant can indicate where they may be at a point where that could be turned over, because if not, if we are saying final occupancy, that could be many years out while this is going on, and we're expecting, as negotiated, this restroom and parking lot. So maybe they can determine when they can finish it. Would it be in your first, third, or second, third, or fourth, or whatever you do it in quadrants? I don't know for sure. Maybe they can look into their plans to see if we can get that signed off and turned over to us before the final certificate's issued, because it could be a long time. And I think our residents are expecting, through these negotiations, this restroom and parking lot for the trail. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilor Austin.
So if I could just help or assist Councilor Orme a little bit, you don't want to turn this over before the project's done, because the space is tight. They need lay-down area, as Councilor Roby mentioned, that you have to put trucks and other things on. And when we get the rail trail parking lot with the facility, we want it done. We don't want to have construction vehicles, other things. So to tie it up anywhere in the middle of the building of the project, I don't think is going to serve the city well at all. These folks build projects for a living. They don't carry them on endlessly year after year. I assume Jim and his team want to make money. They want to finish construction, rent out the units. They don't, to build it and say we don't have one left, they don't work. It's just not done anywhere. These guys wouldn't be in business if they do that. I mean, that's not right. So I would not change that particular language in that section, Madam Chair.
And Madam Chair, if I may, I'm just curious when the structure will be completely done and then you do all the final work inside. Be curious how you go forward with your occupancy permits. Do you still have large equipment coming through for those last quadrants? Or are you just finishing the inside? And that's why I'm saying, if you can finish this in the middle part, I think that's negotiating a good situation where our residents get the benefit of the restrooms and the parking lot without, as Councilor Larson said, major construction vehicles going through. Obviously, when you put the structure up, I don't think you're putting it up in halves. You'll be putting the whole structure up, am I correct? And then doing the inside?
So, yeah, the way it typically works, and I don't want to overcommit here, not being the construction guy on the project, is you would see, from a layman's eye, right, the building will be up. Generally, when our first phase is delivered, the subsequent phases are pretty far along. That said, some of the, as I said previously, some of the exterior components are not in final form at that point because, yes, they're not heavy equipment such that they're pouring concrete and things like that any longer, but there's still a significant number of construction vehicles coming in and out for plumbing, electric, HVAC, and all those things. They're not concrete trucks, but they're still significant and they're still putting wear and tear on the property. So we typically don't final coat our properties regardless of the situation till the very end. Landscaping is another one, right? That doesn't typically go into the very end because that can very easily get damaged by construction vehicles, whether they're large or smaller. But you're right in that the vast majority of the work will be happening on the subsequent phases inside, but we would then come back and finish the outside, if that makes sense.
If I may, do you not landscape and do final pavement before the first quadrant's done? Or however you're planning to do it?
So again, we would do some landscaping, but it's not in final form generally. And again, we would usually have the parking in a binder form. And it's really hard to say. In this case, we have a garage, right? So it's very different if we have a surface parking lot. If we have a surface parking lot that's going to be used by a portion of the building, then we would have to finish it and stripe it and pave it to open up a portion of the building. Here, it's a parking garage, so it's a little bit different. So, I'm trying to talk through sort of historically how we've done things. Every project is very different depending on where the parking is, how, is it in a parking garage, is it a parking lot, and things like that. So those logistics haven't been figured out yet at this point, in time. It's doable. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's not doable to deliver that portion before the project is 100% complete. I do not think it is the ideal scenario for us or for the city to deliver that earlier, just because there's too much going on, with the project until it's done, in our opinion.
And if I may, Madam Chair, how long are you expecting to take to build this to final occupancy?
So I'd have to get back to you with the specifics, but it's going to be about 2 years plus or minus. Probably a little bit less, but I'd want to misspeak on the exact number of months.
And again, that's why I was saying maybe you can look at your project, say, okay, we got the plumbers coming in their vehicles, no heavy trucks. It might be at the time of that point and other finishing type companies to consider having our part that's being part of the $1 million payment completed. So that's why the word final occupancy does concern me. So it'd be nice to see if you can find a happy middle. That's what I'm asking for. And come back to the council and see if that benefits our residents and it shows good faith effort. So that's why I'm asking. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I may be wrong, but I would think the legal department would not want the public to be on that property. Even though the piece was conveyed to the city, it's still a construction site. So I would think that the council or the city might accept it, but would have it blocked off as not open to the public until you were completely done. So that makes perfect sense to me. I'm going to call on Councilor Doucette because he's had his hand up, and then I'll go to you, Councilor Ossing.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So there's I understand as far as your construction going is you're basically working on the building on the outside shell, and there's lots of concerns for safety and stuff in the outside shell. Once you get into the insides of the building, there's not as much concern on effects on the outside of the building because you may be doing sheetrock painting and stuff like that. Nothing's going to get thrown out a window and all that stuff. On the other hand, we're talking about a piece of the property where there's a marquee retail establishment that's supposed to be there. And that marquee retail establishment needs a good parking lot for their customers to go to. And I think that has a more impediment to get you to finish that corner so that if you have someone signed up to do the retail there, they got a nice parking lot for their customers to go to. And if you're going to wait and that's going to have a delay, you may find some delays getting the retail person or the retail business to get into that spot, because there's more of a hook to that from your business perspective than it is from the city. If you want, so I don't think that us forcing you to force your schedule for something like this is not, my respects to Councilor Oram, we're barking up the wrong tree with that. you got other issues that you need to confront as far as setting your schedule to, but you need to be aware, from the retail perspective, they want a nice parking lot for their customers. And when that parking lot is ready, then at that point, you should be giving it to the city and handing it off, because that way at least you don't have to pay the taxes on it too. The other part of this is basically, we got to talk about the, I love the idea and concept of the public restroom that's going to be there. We're trying to figure out how it goes in such a way that it doesn't block visibility or anything else. And I understand it'd probably be an expensive building, which is why the $1 million was flowing back and forth, because a lot of that money is being spent to build that building wherever the restrooms are going to be. But we'll
And
cover that.
That may
in
be
another
true.
meeting.
It's my understanding, though, that once this is conveyed to the city, that parking lot is for the rail trail, not for the retail. The retail will park on the street or
Okay.
somewhere else, and I don't know exactly how we're going to do that, because they're not going to have a police officer there telling people, you can't park here if you don't have a bike on the back of your car, or you don't have walking shoes on and walk on the trail. So I think that's a concern with the city, that whole use of
Thank you for the
this. It's a
clarification on that.
concern for me for the traffic coming in and out of there, with Highland Street right next to it, and bicycles and walkers crossing the street. So I'm still, that one is still a big issue for me, but it may only be my issue, although it was commented on from both Ms. Ryder and Mr. DePercio. So, Councilor Ossing, did you have something else to say on the rail trail
Just a minor
specifically?
comment, Madam Chair. You need to tie it to the final occupancy, and to maybe help Council Orm's concern, go down to the Green Project. They're looking to put people in that facility in 2 months. It is a huge construction project right now. They're not gonna have all the paving, they're not gonna have all the outside done, they're not gonna have all the plantings done, but they're gonna have people coming in there, all right? And just as the applicant said, they're gonna quarter off where construction vehicles can't go. This lot is too small, all right? The construction vehicles gotta park somewhere. And personally, I don't wanna take over that lot until they're done. And I want it clean, done, not, 75% occupied. No, they've got signed agreements that say how this whole land swap deal is gonna work. All right, and we'll get you copies of it if that's what you'd like. But I would respectfully request you drop that, because it's not a winner for the city. Just let it, as written, is how you want it to transpire, so we get the best parcel when they're done. Because when they're done, they walk away, then we gotta fix it, and I don't wanna be fixing it, because we messed it up during the construction process.
And Madam Chair, if I may respond to that, that's where you put in information within the agreement that the final sign-off, because they could have their final occupancy several years away for the final unit. So that's why I'm saying, I think there's room for negotiation. And again, if indeed there's concern for, one, safety, well, there should be concern for the safety of their residents as well. And two, if there's concerns about the way the lot is set up prior to the final occupancy, there should be something in writing that when it is at its final occupancy, we make sure an audit's taken to assure that that parking lot and nothing else was damaged. I'm concerned about, where residents have heard there's going to be bathrooms down there, and if they're waiting for years, I don't think it's fair. I'm here to represent the city residents, and that's why I'm suggesting some form of negotiation with the applicant, and it can have within it that the final occupancy and the final sign-off of that parking lot is through an audit. It can be done. There's no ands or buts about it, because they got residents going through there well before our residents there'll be our residents then being able to use those restrooms who are on that trail. And I can promise you, many residents love the idea that this restroom, maybe a restaurant someday too, is going in on the bike trail. It's a very important facet. It's a really attractive facet for this proposal. Thank you.
All right, I think we will go on to number 8, which is the parallel parking spaces and the sidewalks. Prior to the issuance of a final certificate of occupancy for the use, The applicant shall grant to the city any easements deemed necessary by the city engineer for the parallel parking spaces and sidewalks along Lincoln Street and Mechanic Street as shown on the plans. If the city accepts as public ways any portions of the parallel parking spaces and sidewalks along Lincoln Street and Mechanic Street, the city council hereby finds that any resulting change in the site's boundaries and setbacks meet the provisions of section 65039F of the zoning ordinance for modified dimensional parking design and landscaping requirements for the reasons set forth in finding C of this decision. So I think this is all part of the conversation for the zoning that we just approved to allow you to have those.
Correct, and as laid out to the property line right now, the building meets the 25-foot setback. Of course, if the city accepts as a public way the entirety of the parallel parking spaces and the sidewalk, which I would assume the city probably would want to, then we would no longer meet that setback because the measurement would be to the curb of the sidewalk.
Is everybody, Councilor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I brought this up in the public hearing. I just want to emphasize it here again. There is a bike trail that goes to the south of this facility, east of this facility. On Lincoln Street, you got to recognize that people are going to be taking the bike trail and heading up Lincoln Street. So how there's a bike path and parking and sidewalk all has to be coordinated so that, you know, it's a complete, almost a complete street design, but the safety of a bike rider needs to be taken into account, considering the nature of where we are here. Where, you know, the more appealing the bike traffic is, the more appealing this facility is going to be too. I mean, there's, you know, I can see lots of people renting here and working either at the hospital or Boston Scientific and never getting on the road, just taking the highway pretty much, taking the bike trail pretty much all the way. So that's a great opportunity. Thank you.
It is, interestingly enough, though, I know we had a conversation about complete streets, and on Lincoln Street, there is no specific bike lane. There's a white line that's painted down the side of the road, but it's not specifically marked with bicycles as a bike lane, and it interacts with the bump outs and where there's parking for cars. So I've seen people that come around the bike path onto Lincoln and they take the sidewalk up. They're not in the street, which is not
I do a
the
lot
right
of
way,
biking.
but-
I know, I do a lot of biking. I know it's the right way, but the safest way in some streets is to be on the sidewalk.
Yeah,
You know,
but-
Farm Road's another example of that, just to be a
Yes.
separate
So
example.
I think that will be another issue that, between the bicycles that might want to come down Lincoln, the cars that are parking. But, all right, number 9 is the Jefferson Street parking lot. Prior to the issuance of a building permit for the buildings associated with the use, the applicant shall provide a payment to the city in the amount of $468,038.50 to be used by the city to make improvements to the city-owned parking lot located at 56 Jefferson Street, which serves the Assabet River Rail Trail. So that is the piece where it was my understanding was going to be paved by you, but it is not. It's, we're getting money to do what the city wants to do with it.
If I may, Madam Chair, part of the rationale is that's existing city property. And so us taking on a project on city property versus at the parking lot at our site, which will be our property, we will then build on it and then convey it to the city. We thought it's cleaner on the city property to provide funding and on our property to do the work. It also helps address some of the public construction procurement issues that may arise doing work on city property.
And if there is a decision to have the bathrooms at that parking lot versus the corner, those of us on the committee to see what we want to do.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Orem.
Earlier, we discussed the negotiations that occurred, the $468,038.50. Is that within that paperwork that you're planning to share with us to see where you got that cost analysis from?
Through the chair, yes, Councilor Orem.
Thank you very
It's an
much.
exhibit to the MEDC land swap agreement, yes.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
And number 10 is the neighboring properties at 91, 103, and 103A Mechanic Street. The applicant shall install and maintain along the property line of the site adjacent to 91 Mechanic Street a privacy fence with a height of 6 feet where permissible under the city code, and vegetated screening to help minimize the view of the site from 91 Mechanic Street. The applicant shall install and maintain along the boundary line of the site adjacent to 103 and 103A Mechanic Street fencing and vegetative screening to help minimize the view of the site from 103, 103A Mechanic Street. Whenever possible, the applicant shall preserve and maintain existing trees to screen the site from neighboring properties. And on the view that you have up there is, which one of the houses is the white one that is facing, do you know?
Through the chair, that's 91 Mechanic Street.
Okay, so that,
And I would urge you, this is a concept plan. We haven't, reached final decision with a neighbor there in terms of, what the screening may be. But we have plans provided and we're in discussions with them.
okay, and you've commented that that's still subject to negotiation, so that may change. And number 11 is
Madam
this.
Chair, if I may.
Council
Just-
Orm.
Just referencing the town engineer's question on 91 Mechanic Street related to, he noted it's necessary to achieve adequate sight distance from the proposed driveway. Has this been permitted, was the question. This is built into this item, this condition, so I was just curious if I may, through you to them, to the applicants, has that been, I know you said it's still in preliminary format, but any consideration for that? From what the
Through the chair,
engineer?
part of our discussions are the landscaping, from the driveway edge into the property would be different than the landscaping further in. For that exact reason, the city code has certain requirements with respect to the height of vegetation. So that'd be part of that discussion.
And if there are any permissions that are granted, that would just be a contract between you and the landowner? It wouldn't be something specified in the special permit, is that correct, or is that your plan? All right, site access and safety, 11A, the site driveway access easement across the rail trail parking lot and the vehicle turnaround driveway shall be a minimum of 24 feet in width and designed to accommodate the turning and maneuvering requirements of emergency vehicles. And I'm sure that will be gone over with a fine-tooth comb by the fire department representative at site plan. B, for all perpendicular parking spaces, the drive aisle behind the parking should be a minimum of 23 feet in order to facilitate parking maneuvers. C, vehicles exiting the site should be placed under stop sign control with a marked stop line. D, all signs and pavement markings to be installed with the site shall conform to the applicable standards on the manual of the manual on uniform traffic control devices. E, sidewalks shall be provided to link the building entrances to the sidewalks along Lincoln Street and Mechanic Street as shown on the plans. F, the Americans with Disabilities Act compliant wheelchair ramps shall be provided for crossing the site driveway and the rail trail parking lot entrance, or the driveway and entrance shall be designed such that the sidewalks along Lincoln Street and Mechanic Street are flush with the driveway and the entrance. G, signs and landscaping installed in the vicinity of the site driveway and the rail trail parking lot entrances shall be designed and maintained so as not to restrict lines of sight. H, snow accumulations in the vicinity of the site driveway and rail trail parking lot entrance shall be promptly removed where such accumulations would impede sight lines. And I guess that might be a conversation. Is there snow storage on site? Is it marked in the site plan? I haven't really looked at it too carefully. I know that that will be site plan question. Do you know off the top of your head, will there be any?
We don't have snow storage shown on the plans right
So
now.
everything will have to be cleaned up and trucked off the site?
Right.
Okay. And I, as accommodations for future electronic vehicle EV charging stations shall be installed in at least 10% of the parking spaces in the parking garage, with at least 20 parking spaces having EV charging stations installed upon occupancy of the parking garage. So I think that is a comment that you had asked about, Councilor Doucette, and Councilor Orm, you.
I just wonder if that could be increased, Madam Chair.
So tell me what the difference is between, shall be installed in at least 10% in the parking garage and 20% or 20 parking spaces. Where are those 20 not in the garage?
Yeah, Madam Chair, so they are, but so there's, the way these work, so you have to put an underground or, conduit for these charging stations, that feed back to the electric panels. Those electric panels have to be sized accordingly for the number of charging stations that you're gonna have, either day one or someday. So you have to oversize those electric panels for the service that you're gonna provide at some point. So what we're saying is, there will be conduit in place such that at some point in the future, you can add more and more charging stations, and that 20 of those will actually be installed on day one when the doors open. And so it's future-proofing for demand down the road when, if and when more and more electric vehicles are, present in the building.
Okay, so to open though, you would have 10%.
We would be prepared for having infrastructure for 10% with having 20 actually installed on day one of opening the project, is what we're
Okay.
saying.
Madam Chair?
Counselor Doucette?
Thank you very much. I completely agree with their approach with this as far as having 20 to begin with, adding up to 10% units to be built in expansion. You can always go beyond that. There's nothing that's going to stop that. What will stop you, or what will pull the additional demand is basically you get more and more electric cars in that garage. Your tenants are going to ask for more charging stations, and you will have to respond. So, this is not a cap. This is just, the first phase of expansion. What they're doing, what they can expand to. Beyond that, they got to start building more piping and stuff to get more capacity out there. So this is very reasonable. Thank you.
All right. Counsel Wagner?
I think, to clarify, to put that in numbers, if I'm calculating right, you're talking about 10% is 45 spaces. That's one of the most generous ones we've got so far, with 20 ready to go, and then the infrastructure in place to increase as needed. I think that's pretty good. And same, like Councilor just said, you can always add in the future, but this sets you up so that you can add easily, and I think that's a great number.
That's correct.
So does that answer your question?
Yes,
or
and Madam Chair, I agree with the fellow councilors that, and it really is market demand, and I have a feeling you'll be having a lot more than 45 down the road as the market demand requires it. And you're the ones running the buildings, so I'm sure you're going to see that in the future, probably the near future, which is a good thing. Just a note, Madam Chair, would be a good review for you to see if solar panels could help with those charging stations. Thank you.
And also, you don't intend to have any of the on-street parking spaces be EV, would you?
No, Madam Chair, we don't have that proposed. This will be in the garage.
All right, number 12 is transportation alternatives. The applicant shall assign a transportation coordinator to coordinated transportation demand management program for the site. Information regarding public transportation services, map schedules, and fare information shall be posted in a central location and/or otherwise made available to residents and employees at the site. A welcome packet shall be provided to residents and employees detailing available public transportation services, bicycle and walking alternatives, and commuter options available. Commercial tenants should be encouraged to offer specific amenities to discourage off-site trips, including providing a break room equipped with the microwave and a refrigerator, offering direct deposit of paychecks, and similar measures to reduce overall traffic volumes and travel during peak traffic volume periods. Work at home workspaces shall be provided to support telecommuting by residents of the site. Pedestrian accommodations shall be incorporated into the site and consist of walkways that connect to the existing sidewalks along Lincoln Street and Mechanic Street. A central mail drop shall be provided for the building, within the building for residents, and secure bicycle parking shall be provided for residents, visitors, patrons, and commercial tenants, including weather-protected bicycle parking in a bike room located within the garage. Lighting is the exterior lighting at the site shall be downward facing and shielded to minimize impacts on neighboring properties, with a lighting plan for the site to be reviewed and further conditioned during the site plan review process. exterior lighting associated with the retail and commercial properties at the site shall be shut off outside of operating hours, except for lighting necessary for security and emergency access. And then we have the standard compliance with applicable laws and the recording of the decision. I will just throw out there for the lighting piece, if anybody is familiar with Boston Scientific, their driveway has their lights, both solar and wind operated, and I find it fascinating that nobody else has done it. So I don't know how hard it is, but I love watching the little wind things twirling around as I walk on the rail trail. So I'll just throw that out as a idea.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Councilor Orem.
I'm curious, and I've only seen this in Europe. I was in Europe recently, and when you go in their garages, their lights come on. They're censored, so that, and they're obviously controlled with gates, so they're secure. Curious if you've ever seen that. I've seen it myself only in Europe. I don't know if you've ever considered that. That would help save on the lighting and the reflection of lighting as well as your utility bills. I don't know if that's something you've ever seen.
For you on that one.
We have, Councilor, through the chair.
Yes.
There are, you can set anything kind of towards motion detectors. From a safety perspective, there is some minimal lighting that you do want to maintain. We can certainly take a harder look at how that works because it's in everybody's interest cost-wise.
Yeah, just a friendly comment. I'm not saying you have to, but it's your energy you're paying for, and the more you can save, the better. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I saw Councilor Wagner's hand.
I just want to reiterate that, and I'm thinking about that in terms of the bathroom too, but for safe, you may not think of it, but as a woman, certainly, parking garages are very dangerous places and would rather see you use economical light bulbs than have it be motion activated and have it in the dark. It would create a very dangerous situation for your residents, and I'm glad you answered as you did. It needs to be well lit.
Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. One thing I would like to add just to the overall agreement is I would like to see the land swap agreement as Appendix C. I mean, I think that's important to have that as part of the transparency of this project. So I hope the people from MEDC understand that, but this is something that has to be part of the public record, I believe.
All right, I will put that in there and
Thank you.
put it to the solicitor and MEDC if there's any objections or reasons why it can't be. All right, so I believe I have some homework to find out about the company that will do the peer review of the traffic management, to find out if there is a company that can review the fiscal analysis, or if that is actually something we all want. I don't know
Madam,
who does that. Councilor Ossing?
so the fiscal analysis is us. We know what it costs our guys to do work. I mean, department heads should just say that they looked at it and either agree with the numbers, they don't. We're not gonna pay someone to go look at what they did for a fiscal analysis.
Well,
That's a total waste of taxpayer money. I mean, this is, the school should be able to say, yes, those costs are reasonable. The police should say, yep, that's right. Fire chief, same thing. Same thing with DPW. The assessor should say, yep, that's about the right value for the place, and that's about the taxes we're gonna bring in. This isn't rocket science. They put down what they think it's gonna cost, and our guys know that, and they should be able to say they either agree or don't agree. I mean, please don't go for a study for that.
Oh, is the committee okay with this just being, it can be part of site plan review, or I could ask for Ms. Bully to send it out as you just described to all of the site managers that are mentioned and have them look at it.
And Madam Chair, if I can
fine.
just comment to the comment just made by Councilor Ossing, I don't disagree with him. If it was a peer review, just like the Traffic Commission, I would expect the applicant to be paying for it, not city residents to be paying for a peer review. But I do believe we have the competency in this city to have our own review it, so it would save a step, I guess. But it wasn't meant for the city to spend money on a peer review. It was to request the applicant, as we're doing with the traffic study, to pay in for the peer review. Thank you.
So Madam Chair, so I want to be careful. So our site special permit process says applicants over certain size projects have to do a traffic study, all right? We've never asked for peer reviews in the past. If we're gonna start doing that, we've gotta look at our process, because if they're gonna pay to do the traffic study, and then they're gonna pay to have it peer reviewed, anybody see any concerns with that? I mean, we have an engineering department that has given us good data on all traffic studies while I've been on this project, and we've been very comfortable with our own traffic engineer, or our own city engineer, providing that level of detail. Now, if the our city engineer says, this one's too complicated, I need help, yep, I'm in. I haven't heard that from Tom yet.
I haven't heard it either, but I have heard the agreement. I went to the commissioner first because I didn't want to step on toes. He sent it to the engineering department, and the engineering department has recommended someone, and so my sense is that they feel that's the best way to do this.
And Madam Chair, if I can comment, because I've been involved with site plan review in my previous work, unless your civil engineer working for the city is, if they are a traffic engineer with that specification for their professional engineering stamp, so be it. But you just answered the question, so thank you.
All right, and then the plan going forward is to have site plan review, look at this on Tuesday, see if there are any further comments for a meeting on Wednesday. I don't know if we would have the peer review from the traffic study at that point, hopefully. We can talk about that, and maybe you can reach out to Mr. DePercio to clarify who it is and work out the payment details.
I will gladly do that. I will be flabbergasted if the peer review is done a week from today, but we'll certainly see what the timing may be.
Okay. There may be other concerns and questions that people have as we go through this a second time, and there may not be. So, all right, this side of the room's been very quiet tonight. Councilor Irish.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question addressed. I know you have a wonderful management team on staff. What is your policy for the residents as well as the mixed use in regards to satellite dishes, banners, flags, things in the storefront windows? Do you have a policy in place, as well as if you're having pets? I was just wondering if you do have a policy in place for some of those items.
We do, and I'm happy to follow up with the specifics, but we certainly do not allow satellite dishes on the property. We limit what is allowed on balconies by residents. We have never had an issue with retailers and what they've done, but certainly our retail leases would specify what kind of signage is allowed. Open to suggestions there on things you may have seen in the past that you didn't like. But that has not been an issue. We've certainly encountered many issues, having done this for many years with residents, but not with commercial tenants. So if there's something that's been a concern to the city, we're more than happy to listen and insert that into
Thank you.
into a
I mean,
lease.
the goal is not to have so much in the window, as a safety measure as well for police and fire departments.
Right.
Sometimes a certain percentage of the windows are full. That could be a safety issue. But thank you. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And will you allow pets? I think
Yeah,
you would
I-
ask that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, pets are allowed. Correct.
Okay. All right, anybody else with any final questions, comments, concerns? No?
Motion to adjourn?
We will adjourn. This is still in the committee, and there'll be a posting to 6:30 work.
I would request, Madam Chair, if you could have that at 7. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but the chamber has planned an event, as they have in the last several years, to invite department heads. And I think it's down at Fireflies. It's 5 to 6, but I think if we could have that at 7, it might be better.
Does that work for the team?
for me.
Okay, I know it does probably make it a little easier for our
Thank you, Madam Chair.
venturing from Boston to get here at the nick of time. All right, so there's been a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are adjourned, and our clock is missing, so let's see. I'm going to trust my